So we are starting chapter 46. Now I said I really enjoy chapter 46. Why do I really enjoy it? It is the most easy. I'm American. I'll use the word easy. It is the easiest road the Alter Rebbe teaches in his entire 53 chapters. I mean, we're towards the end, relatively speaking, chapter 46. This is the easiest path to really, really naturally loving God. So I really appreciate it. Of course, this is the premise of the entire Tanya. The Tanya starts off, the cover page of the Tanya is a statement of purpose. That's a wise way to start. What is this about? And the statement of purpose of Tanya is to teach us. What does this mean? How are we supposed to attain the verse? The entire 53 chapters is explaining one verse. The matter is close to you, in your mouth, in your heart, to do it. What matter? Loving God, fearing God, and through love and fear, completely serving God. This is the entire premise of Tanya. The entire premise of Tanya is the more you love, the more you fear, the more you have an emotional relationship, the more natural it is to serve. So all of your Judaism naturally flows from the deep feelings you have for God, from your love of God and your awe, your reverence, your fear of God. So how do I attain that? Good question. Now let's learn 53 chapters. So we've learned it doesn't always seem so easy. Right? The verse says, Ki karov elecha hadavar me'oid. Ki karov. Karov means close. And me'oid means very. So the verse is telling us, the verse is Moshe, as Moses talking. It's karov ma'od. It's very close to have this relationship with God. And we're like, really? I never would have realized. I know it's very wonderful. I know it's praiseworthy. I know it's a great idea. But I never would have thought it was easy, let alone very easy. So we started learning Tanya. And when we got to chapter 17, the Rebbe says, this is Karov. Meaning the first 16 chapters, he didn't tell us that yet. But in chapter 17, what was 17 about? 17 was taking this concept that we learned in Alter Rebbe said in chapter 17. Yes, I said that correctly. In 16, the Rebbe taught us that there's something called tivuna. Tivuna is an intellectualized relationship with God, like an emotion in your brain, love and fear, compulsion in your brain that's like a quasi-emotion. And the Rebbe says, look, this is Karov. It's doable because it's not like creating a love, an emotion that's intense. This is a compulsion in your brain. That's very doable. That's Karov. So that's what the Rebbe told us in chapter 17. Now, chapters 1 through 17 is the long road of Tanya. In chapter 18, we switched gears, and for the first time, we were introduced to a concept we never knew before, basically, called you guys already love God. You all have a natural relationship with God. It's embedded in your soul. It's what we call in Hebrew, ahava misuteres. So starting in chapter 18, the Rebbe says, in the beginning of chapter 18, this is Karov Ma'oi, meaning a chapter ago, in chapter 17, after teaching you for 16 chapters, I said, okay, guys, we finally got to something that's Karov, because this is doable. You're creating, you're going to think thoughts, and the thoughts are going to create this intellectual drive in your brain, which is a quasi-emotion, but it's not like really creating an emotion, which is very difficult. So this is very doable. And then in chapter 18, we switched gears. Instead of talking about creating, we're talking about uncovering. And as we're talking about uncovering, oh wow, this is Karov Ma'od. You don't even have to create anything. So there we were introduced to what our opening verse said, Karov Ma'od, with the natural love. Now that natural love we learned about round 1 in chapters 18 through 25. We learned about it quite fundamentally. If you remember, we came back to the natural love in chapter 44, not too long ago. We're right now beginning chapter 46, and 45 was a short chapter. So in chapter 44, we discussed 2 deeper levels within the natural love that every single one of us has, right? And we discussed this level of loving God because he's your life, and another love, loving God because he's your father. So those were 2 gifts embedded in the big, beautiful package of natural love. So they're part of the Karov Ma'od, very close. Why are they very close? Because you don't have to create them. They already exist inside of you. They're in your soul. You just have to uncover them. And as we discussed in chapter 44, these 2 loves, God as my life and God as my father, are more powerful and more accessible than what we learned in chapter 18 through 25. Now we're in chapter 46. And in chapter 46, the Rebbe says something stronger than our original verse. The Rebbe says, what I'm teaching you now, this new technique to loving God, is karov ma'oid ma'oid. Very, very close. Let's take the word close and make it accessible, because I don't think it really means easy, but it means close, accessible. It's very, very accessible to you. So remember, this is our survey over Tanya. In chapter 17, Tvuna, creating that intellectual compulsion, that's accessible. It's a thought in your mind that's going to push you. Chapter 18, oh wow, now we're finding out we have a natural love that we are born with, that is embedded in our soul. That's very close, because you don't have to create anything, you have to uncover it. But of course, we learned it's a bit of a job to uncover it. And then the natural loves in chapter 44 were seemingly even easier to uncover. And now in 46, the Rebbe is saying, this one is karov ma'oid ma'oid. This one is very, very accessible, as we will explain in this chapter. So as I said, I really appreciate what the Rebbe is talking about here, because it's so doable and it's so significant. And this is what we want. We want to feel a love for God. And the Rebbe is giving us such a practical, doable, very, very close way to access it. So again, in this chapter, like in chapter 44, and like in 18 through 25, we are going to speak about a natural love. But here, unlike previously, we're really going to talk on both sides. In a sense, the thoughts we are going to think will create a love. And at the same time, the thoughts we are going to think will uncover our natural love. Okay, any questions yet? All right, let's start. So we are looking inside chapter 46. V'yesh derech yashar lifnei ish. And now here's a straight road before a person. Shave l'chol nefesh, equal to every soul, doable for all, very democratic. V'karov hadavar ma'oid ma'oid, and very, very accessible to love God, as we're going to instruct. Now the Rebbe says, and this is very unusual for Tanya, he says this is shave l'chol nefesh. This is equal for all. Everyone can do this. That's very unique about this approach. Meaning until now, and again, we're up to chapter 46. We've been learning 45 chapters of Tanya. That's a lot. Thank God. And there's a lot of ways that we've been instructed how to connect to God. And in general, if we want to speak very globally, the more knowledgeable you are, the wiser you are, the more spiritually sensitive you are, the holier you are, all of those things give you a bit of an advantage. If you're wiser, you can see more and appreciate more in what the Rebbe is instructing. If you're more knowledgeable, you can take the concepts the Rebbe says and you can connect them to many other things you know, so it becomes very fully fleshed out and developed. If you're more spiritual, it resonates much more strongly. You feel much stronger, the spirituality of doing this. If you're holy and you're a very godly person, this is your very natural arena. So in general, every single thing we have learned until now in Tanya, certain people have certain advantages. And that's life. Obviously in life, different people have different advantages in different situations. So if you're wiser or more knowledgeable or holier or more spiritual, it makes sense. You have an advantage in what the Rebbe is saying. Now the Rebbe is saying this is equal for all. Meaning every single person is in the same playing field. You don't need more knowledge. You don't need more wisdom. You don't need more holiness. You don't need more spirituality. It's actually almost like if you are weaker spiritually, if you're not as spiritually strong as you should be or would like to be, you might even have an advantage here. Now I'm saying might, because of course none of us are looking to be weak spiritually to experiment and see if this works. But what the Rebbe is suggesting could possibly be even more accessible and more natural if a person is on a lower spiritual status than if a person's on a higher one. But definitely, well, there's an advantage because he's smarter, because he's wiser, because he's more knowledgeable, because he's holier, because he's more spiritual. Okay, fine. And here there's an advantage if you're a little weaker. So all the advantages, like we speak in this week's parsha of the daughters of Tzlafcha, all the advantages even out. And in the end, it's equal for all, this very special approach, as we will read. The matter is very, very close. Now again, I could sometimes have a tendency to exaggerate, being human, but the Alter Rebbe doesn't. Every word of the Alter Rebbe in Tanya is so thought out. We know there was a situation where the Alter Rebbe spent 6 weeks contemplating a vav. Vav means and. That one letter that symbolizes the word and, he spent 6 weeks, yes and no and yes and no it. So when the Rebbe says here, it's karo, me'oid, very, very close, very, very doable, very, very accessible. He really wants us to view it that way. He's saying it with a lot of thought. La'oirer, to arouse, ulaha'ir or ha'ahava, to illuminate the light of love, hatakua, that's embedded, umisoteres belibo, that's innate, hidden in his heart. So as I said, this is another time around that we're trying to access our natural love. We said we first were introduced to the natural love in a serious way in chapter 18 through 25. And then 2 chapters ago, in chapter 44, we found out there were more levels in our natural love, and we found out about 2 more. And now in chapter 46, the method the Rebbe is suggesting is to access that natural love that we all have. Lios me'ira b'toikef oira. To take that natural love that you all have, you don't have to create anything, but you want to access it, that it should shine with all of the strength of her light. Ke'esh bayara, like a flaming fire. Bisgalus libo umaycho, completely revealed in your mind and in your heart. Now you can say, wait a minute, why are we going to my mind here? It should be in my heart. And that's true. But we've already seen that the Rebbe wants us to know there is an option to feel in your mind, which obviously is not going to be as intense a feeling as feeling in your heart, but it's a lot easier to reach our mind than our hearts. The hearts are like stuck, embedded in the depth of our body. And therefore, to turn around that and make it a godly feeling could take more work, but to feel in your mind is so close to your soul. They're both going in the same direction. So to feel in your mind, for sure. And with this love, we trust you're going to feel it in your heart as well. Limsor nafsho lahavaya. The Rebbe says, this is going to be really intense. This is such a love. This is such a passion. You want to give over your life to God. V'gufo, give over your body to God. Uma'oido, your ma'oid, like we say in Shema, b'chol vavcha, b'chol nafshcha, b'chol me'odecha, which could mean all of your resources, or a limitless love. This is so limitless, which is why you'd give God your body, you'd give God your soul. You'd give God everything, because you have such a passion, such a burning love for Him. B'chol lev, b'chol nefesh, uma'od. As we say in Shema, with all your heart, with all your soul, with all your being. Me'umka deliba, from the depth of your heart, be'emes la'amiso, with an absolute truth. And as Chassidus explains, truth means constant. An absolute truth means it's everlasting. So the Rebbe is using really strong words to describe this emotion. This flaming love, if you remember, we discussed love as a fire versus love as water, and how love should be water, but all over Tanya, love is fire, because there's such strength to that love, burning, self-sacrificing on every level, even self-sacrificing your soul, permanently, everlasting. The Rebbe is saying, I'm telling you it's doable, I'm telling you it's very, very doable, and I'm telling you it's very, very powerful. Because through this very doable approach, you're pulling out such a burning strength for God that's embedded in your soul. It's embedded in all of our souls. That we don't have to work for. Ubefrat, and especially, b'shas kriyashma uberchosecha kemoshi yispa'er, and especially during davening, and specifically in davening during Shema and the blessings of Shema. So this concept, which we were never introduced to before, but the Alter Rebbe discusses from now and in further places in Hasidic thought. When we think of davening, the 2 spiritual highlights of our morning prayers is the Shema and the Shmona Esrei, the Amidah. The Shema is when we're declaring the oneness of God. Shmona Esrei, when we're standing with our feet together and emulating the angel, and we're asking God basically all of our requests. So those are the two high points of prayer, but they're very different. The Shemona Esrei, the Amidah, when we're standing and we're asking all of our requests from God, is a time when we're asking God of all our requests. This is the moment, this is prayer. We're turning to God and we're asking him our needs. Shema, like, 2 pages or so before in your prayer book, is a very different energy. Shema, we're not asking God anything. Shema, we're expressing our love for God. Shema is our limitless commitment to God. When a Jew would go to his death, he's not going to his death saying the words of Shemona Esrei. He's self-sacrificing with the verse of Shema, because that's what Shema encapsulates. Shema means, God, you are all. I love you so much that if you need my life, you could take it too. That's the essence line of our faith, which is Shema. So therefore, in our prayers, when we say the Shema prayer, which of course isn't only one line, it's one line and then another line and then 3 paragraphs, the whole Shema prayer in essence is the expression of our love for God and our fear for God also as we continue. As versus the whole Shemona Esrei prayer, which is also very, very important and a very great highlight of our prayers when we're turning and asking God. So therefore, from the perspective of Tanya, the highlight of prayer is Shema. Because Tanya, as we were saying, is all about our having an emotional relationship with God, our fusing with God, our loving God, fearing God, being in awe of God, being nullified to God. Because once I'm in that space, everything else is just automatic. It's natural that here I am in my space serving him completely. As we say, b'chol lev, b'chol nefesh, b'chol ma'od. So to lead up to Shema, in our prayer book, we have 2 blessings. What our sages call the 2 blessings of Shema. Unfortunately, I wasn't wise enough. I actually thought about it for a millisecond and forgot to bring a Siddur prayer book here, and I'm going to give the class. But I'm going to explain it, and I can't show you. You can open up your own to see what I'm talking about. If we're thinking of the prayers, we have what we call Psukei de Zimra, from Hoidu through Yishtabach. When we finish Yishtabach, if you're in shul, if you're in synagogue, of course, then we have Baruch Hu. Now we're moving to a whole new level in our prayers, and we begin what's called the blessings of Shema. So normally when we think of a blessing, we think of like a one-liner. Whatever blessing comes to your mind. Blessed are you, and it takes about a line. Those are actually, according to law, legally called short blessings. There are also long blessings that could be paragraphs. So from when we finish the Yishtabach and the Baruch Hu until Shema, we actually have 2 long blessings. Each one ends with a blessing. Baruch atah, blessed are you, and then we say a few words. That's how we know it was a blessing. All those paragraphs before were part of this long blessing. Why am I going into all of this? Because the Rebbe is going to explain this approach, and he's going to say, and let's put it into as we pray the Shema and her blessing. So I want you to understand what that means. So the first long blessing, which is longer than the second, it's like a page and 2/3, is a blessing that starts Hamei La'aretz and ends Yotzer HaMa'aros, the creator of the luminaries. Blessed are you, God, the creator of the luminaries. What are we talking about in that page and 2/3 blessing? We are describing God's greatness. I mean, I'm saying this very briefly. Obviously, there's many details, but the overarching theme of that blessing, which is a page and 2/3, but it's all in Jewish law viewed as one blessing, we are describing the greatness of God. We are describing the angels. We are describing the angels' search for God. We are describing the angels' realization that God's down here with us. We are describing the greatness of God as we end, Yotzer HaMa'aros, the creator of all the luminaries. That's the first blessing that's leading into Shema. The second blessing, which is shorter, the first blessing is like a page and 2/3, and the second one is more like 2/3 of a page. We describe God's love for us. The second blessing is all about God's love for us. Habocher ba'amo Yisrael ba'ahava, who chooses his people Israel with love. Now, what do we have blessings for? In general, of course, in Judaism, we know we have blessings. And the truth is, before we do commandments, we bless. Obviously, we might think of blessings a lot in terms of food, as we, eat all day. But we also do commandments, and we know we make a blessing, and then we do the commandment. Of course, when we light the Shabbos candles, it's backwards, because once you bring in the Shabbos by the blessing, you wouldn't be able to light the candles. So we have a technical issue, which is why we do the act and then the blessing. But in general, We say a blessing, and then we do the commandment. Why do we bless? A blessing is spiritually the ladder to allow us to climb to the level of spirituality of the commandment. It's scaffolding. It's to help lift us up to the point of the commandment that we can draw down what the commandment is supposed to draw down. That's actually the idea of the word bracha. Blessing is like hamavrich, to take a sapling and pull it down into the ground, that a new tree should grow from that. So that's what we're doing when we bless. And that's why, in general, the words of a blessing are very simple. They tell us the commandment we're about to do, right? Likvaya mezuzah, to fix the mezuzah on your doorpost, bang, 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 you did the commandment. Al achilas matzah, for the eating of the matzah, then you go eat your matzah. Shal Shabbos, Chanukah, blessings. The blessings describe the commandment. Now the sages here created blessings, two blessings, long blessings, scaffolding to this ultimate commandment. Shema is not only part of our prayers, it's a biblical commandment. To do this biblical commandment of Shema, and Shema is a very significant commandment and a challenging commandment, because to fulfill the commandment of Shema, you have to be loving God. It's not like munching into a matzah or banging a mezuzah in place. It's feeling a love for God. So the scaffolding here is more intense than with another more simple commandment of action or even of thought. This is a commandment of feeling. So the sages created two blessings to lift us up to be at the point that we can access the biblical commandment of Shema and draw down the energy by being in the right space, by loving God. How do these two commandments help? Well, the first commandment, as we said, how do these blessings help? The first blessing is focusing us on God's greatness. And the second blessing is focusing us on God's love for us. And when we think those two thoughts, how enormously great God is, and how He loves us so much, this lifts us to the space of being able to love God and fulfill the mitzvah of Shema. I'm going to stop here because the rest of the Rebbe will explain inside, but this concept that I took a lot of time to explain is really the underpinnings of what the Rebbe is going to say now as this technique that is very, very close. Karov ma'od ma'od, going even one beyond the verse. The verse says karov ma'od, very close. The Alter Rebbe is saying it's very, very close to love God using this technique. And the Rebbe says, and especially where? Obviously you're supposed to love God all day long. And as the Rebbe just said, you're going to love God be'emes la'amiso, with an absolute truth, and truth means eternal, so you'll always be loving Him like this, with His enormous passion and self-sacrifice, and especially in the blessings of Shema and Shema. And now we just did an overview, without really finishing the thought, on the blessings of Shema, the absolute greatness of God, God's absolute love for us, which lead us to fulfill the mitzvah, the commandment of Shema, really accepting God with such love that we would sacrifice all for Him. Woohoo! Now this is it. I gave you all these lines of intro. Now this is it. Kasher yasim el libo masha amar kasuv. To put to your heart, really think about a verse from Mishlei. So what does it say in Mishlei, in Proverbs? Kimayim hapanim lepanim kain lev ha'adam el ha'adam. King Solomon's famous words, Kimayim hapanim lepanim, as water mirrors a face, kain lev ha'adam el ha'adam, so does the heart of one man mirror the other. What is he saying here? He's saying something seemingly simple, but of course Solomon was quite wise and second most brilliant man of all time, second only to Mashiach himself. So obviously there's tremendous, tremendous depth in this thought. But the thought is, if you look at a still pool of water, you would see yourself. If the waters are still, you wouldn't see some blurry image that maybe is a person. No, you would see yourself in all of the details. Kimayim hapanim lepanim. You would literally see the details of your face in the water. Well, we know that. Well, Solomon is saying that's a natural phenomena, right? It's not like this is very artistic water here. No, water reflects. There's another natural phenomena that's also reflection. Natural phenomena, just as the water is a natural phenomena. There's a natural phenomena that a heart reflects a heart. That if you love someone and show them that love, they will love you. If you love someone and express that love, even if they don't want to, they will love you. Now, speaking practically, will they love you to the exact same degree? Not necessarily. No. No. But will they love you? Yes. They almost have no choice. Now, if you have this deep love for someone, but you're shy and it's hidden and you're never going to express it, well, don't be frustrated that the rule didn't work. It's not magic. It's a human phenomenon. It's a natural law of nature, if you will. So you got to express the love enough that the other person is aware of it. And then automatically, even if they're not looking for it, they will feel a love for you as well. This is a very powerful concept. And part of the depth of what King Solomon is saying here is it's natural. It's not because the other person wants it or is working on it. Like, oh, I feel so guilty. You love me. Well, I really have no interest in you, but I should start trying. No, not at all. It's a natural phenomena. The water reflecting the face is natural. The heart mirroring the heart is just natural. It just works that way. I don't know if anyone here has personally seen it, and I don't know that we'll take the time to discuss that now, but I have definitely seen it. I've definitely seen this rule at work. It really is a very powerful tool. Now, why are we saying this in Mishlei? I mean, Mishlei is Proverbs. Proverbs is instructing us how to behave. So why in instruction on how to behave would King Solomon be sharing what's natural? That's not how to behave, that's natural. So that's a good question, and that's discussed, and the Lubavitcher Rebbe focus on that in terms of what the Rebbe is saying here, because what the Alter Rebbe is saying is to do something, and he's quoting Solomon, who's saying a rule of nature. So understanding it in the context of Proverbs, which is different than in the context of Tanya, but just to be transparent here and understand, in the context of Proverbs, King Solomon is advising us, so behave this way, right? It's nature. Water reflects a face, like it or not. Water reflects a face, like it or not. Hearts will mirror hearts. So if you want to create a loving environment, if you want to create a warm, positive place, show love, feel love, and show love. And the more you feel and show love, it's nature. The world around you will be loving and will create a better environment for the world. So King Solomon is taking this natural rule, and in Proverbs, in Mishlei, he's advising his student, the one who's studying Mishlei, to behave this way, to be that person that expresses love, to be that person that creates love all around him by loving. That's how it's used in its original context, in Mishlei, in Proverbs. The Alter Rebbe is taking this concept and decontextualizing it, taking it out of Proverbs, taking it out of this is a good way to behave to create loving environment in the world, and saying there's something else very deep King Solomon means here. This is a very deep tool for us to be in a relationship with God. Who loves you more than God? Who expresses that love more than God? Well, as waters mirror a face, a heart mirrors a heart. Love echoes love. So God is showering me with all this love. According to nature, King Solomon is saying this is a rule of nature. It's not what you're supposed to do, it's a rule of nature. According to this rule of nature, I should feel naturally, organically, No work on my part. We like that. No work on our part. We should naturally feel this reflecting love for God. And we could say, well, why isn't it working? Why don't we feel it? It's nature. We see it in our human relationships sometimes. We can see this water mirroring the face in nature, in people's love for each other. So what's not connecting between me and God? Why isn't it working? And the Alter Rebbe says, no, it works very well. It's a very powerful tool. You have to stop and focus and absorb how much is God loving you. The more you feel God's love for you, everything else just happens automatically. Literally. It's a literal truth. As I said before, to me, this is the strongest tool I know in Tanya to love God. Definitely among the top things I've ever gleaned from Tanya is this chapter and is this approach. And it works. It really, really, really does. I've seen it transformatively with myself and with other people that have really walked this road. It's literally a rule of nature that God embedded in our world. When we are aware and feel another person's love for us, we love them automatically. We don't need to work on the love. The love is natural. It's reflecting the love we feel. When we focus on God's love for us, we love God automatically. We don't need to work to create the love. The love is natural. Exactly the same way the water, exactly the same way love in human relationships. It works exactly the same way for God. Going back to the blessings of Shema, this is a point, right? We said we have these two blessings, and it's the ladder. It's scaffolding. It's to lift me up to do properly that challenging commandment of Shema, where I'm really supposed to feel such an enormous love for God. So what's the context? What are the concepts in the two blessings? Well, we said the first blessing was God's greatness, God's enormity. The second blessing was how much God loves you. So based on what we're saying here, the more I think about how much God loves me, the more I naturally love God. But the rabbis, the sages, added and understand God's greatness. Because this is not a human normative relationship between two equals. This is a relationship between the King of Kings and you. So if we take that concept from Mishlei, when one person loves me and I feel it, I love them back automatically. No thought on my part, no desire, it just happens. Now let's tweak the story a little. It's not two people, equals, two friends, spouses, family members, siblings. No, it's someone so much greater than you, but in a healthy way. For whatever reason, we won't, spell out any stories here because that's not the point. Just understand, for healthy, pure, beautiful reasons, this person who's so great has such love for little you. When you feel that this great, enormous person loves you so much, your love for them is even more. Because, oh my, they even know I exist, let alone they have such love for me. I guess the most obvious example of this is if a person feels the Rebbe's love for them. And if you're feeling the Rebbe's love for you, it's not equals. This is the Rebbe. And yet he has such love for you. How does he even know you exist? But if you have been in those experiences personally or in dollars or through writing in or in whatever way where you felt how much the Rebbe loves you, your response is even stronger than in a spouse or a sibling, or because it's so unequal, the relationship. So our sages are saying, appreciate God's greatness. So then when we get to the second blessing, when you feel his love for you, it's like, whoa, it's even more overwhelming. And therefore, even more extreme is the response of your love. So someone just asked me a question in the chat as I was saying that. And the question was, but in a relationship between two people, the receiver loves the giver without reflecting on it. And here we need to reflect. So we need to reflect only because we're a little spaced out sometimes in terms of what God is doing for us. But if you could envision, like I'm thinking of sometimes children and parents, that the parent loves the child so much, but children are sometimes spaced out and they're not tuned in to our love, and therefore they're not reflecting it back. And then sometimes things happen, like they grow up a little, or sometimes they leave their home, or sometimes they're talking to their friends, and something triggers them to stop and think and reflect on all the love their parent has for them and has shown them. And then it's like, whoa, that love they feel for their parent. Well, why they have to reflect? This is a normal human relationship. Yeah, but sometimes we're immature and we're spaced out, and sometimes we take things for granted and we don't appreciate, and we could be like that. We could all be like that. Someone could be very loving and very giving, and we don't even think about it. We don't even notice it to reflect the love because we're not even aware of the love because of our own, immaturity, self-centeredness, etc. But when you stop and think and appreciate, oh my gosh, this person is always doing this for me. I never thought about it, how whenever she goes shopping, she always says, is there anything I could pick up for you? Or any example you could think of. Wow, what a kind neighbor. Every time they shovel their snow, they always just, I'm doing mine, I do yours. So maybe the first 2 or 3 times, wow, that's so nice. And then you stop thinking about it because they always do it. And something makes you stop and be like, wow, look how they're expressing their care for me, how they're expressing their feelings for me. Wow. And then you feel it. So how do we do this for God? Exactly the same way. We stop and we reflect on God's love for us. God's really unconditional love for us. So when I first was thinking about this method many, 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 many years ago, I started doing this before I would say Shema. It seemed to me the most organic place to do it is say the blessings of the Shema, and as you're saying the blessings, think about God's greatness and yet his love for little me, and then stop and reflect on how I've seen that love, and then say the Shema. So that's a really nice thing to do, and I did it for a while, but then I stopped. The reason why I stopped is because I was motivated. This was the beginning of what I always talk about. I was motivated to want to write it down, which you can't do if you're in the middle about say Shema. And I really felt, for many reasons, that writing something down makes something even more concrete and permanent, and it's an action, and many, many other reasons. So I started writing it down, so I couldn't do it then during Shema. So I think my original goal was, well, write it down, but then by Shema, remember what you wrote down, and it sort of fizzled out. So I have not done it this way for many years. So I think it was beautiful when I did it, incorporated within Shema, and I definitely freely am giving that idea for anyone that wants to do it, because it really is very powerful, and it's exactly what the Alter Rebbe is saying here. But for me, what I do is every single day, I write down things that express how God loves me, how I perceive God's love for me. And it is such a powerful tool to feel so loved by God. And in the context of this chapter, to love God so automatically. Now, I have since tremendously broadened this tool, and as I go to any of my classes, I always tell people to do this. I don't know who listens to me, but I always tell people to do this because it is such a transformative, powerful tool for many things. And it makes you feel so loved by God and so secure and so trusting God. And it's only great. It's only really, really beneficial. But the truth is, it really came from here. This was really, really the impetus for that in my life, was this concept that the more I feel God's love for me naturally, the more I naturally love God. And so again, I'm pushing this one more time, as you take time every day. In the morning is great because you're starting off your day that way. At night is great because you're going to sleep with these thoughts circling in your brain all night. In the middle of the day is great because it refocuses you. All time is great. I do it all day long. As you write and write and write how you have experienced God's love today, and as you keep writing this and writing this and writing this, it's totally natural. You don't have to convince yourself. You don't have to like stop and think and, oh, my parent really does love me. Oh yeah, they're doing all this for me. Wow, that's so cool. That's so amazing. You're like the child that's already mature. You're like the child that's there. You're the child that naturally loves their parent because you know how much your parent loves you. And you know it because every single day you're writing. And to write, that means you have to think, and you have to have your eyes open, and you have to observe it, and you have to reflect on it, and you have to write it down. So it really is such a tool. And as the Alter Rebbe is saying here, it's karov ma'od ma'od, because you're not creating the love. You're not even uncovering it. All you're doing is focusing your awareness on how much God loves you. And the more you focus your awareness, the more consistently you focus your awareness, the more you really fill your brain on a daily basis with how much God loves you, everything else just happens automatically. King Solomon said, the rest is all just nature. So this is this very, very powerful gift that the Alter Rebbe is giving us here.